Hi, my name is Joe Cassavaugh. I am the Joe of Puzzles by Joe, and I'm here to do a talk called If I Could Turn Back Time. I've spent a lot of time thinking lately about what I would do if I was 25, 26 or whatever, and had to start over again. And that's what this talk is about, and we're just going to get right to it. So, question is what do life, indie game dev, and weight loss have in common? And that is me over to the left there from right after Siege of last year, so the end of October. The answer to that question is it's a marathon, not a sprint. Okay? But, and on that line, we're going to go with this slide first. I forgot about this one being there. Perfect is the enemy of the good. It's not about being perfect. It's about the effort and the right direction. If I had really set out to lose 70 pounds, I don't think I would have done it. It was definitely not my goal at the beginning. My goal was to move in the right direction. And that's also been true of most of my game dev and most of my life. But when you bring the effort every single day, that's when transformation happens, and that's how real change occurs. Okay. So this is to remind you that life is in fact a marathon, not a sprint. However, this lecture will be a sprint. I'm going to go as fast as possible with tons of tidbits, tons of lots of things, wrapping it up. Hopefully there'll be time for questions, but there may not be. And I'm going to start moving really, really fast. Okay, so why listen to me? I figured I should at least explain that. I have 37 years of programming experience, 29 years of software engineering experience. And I say that because about 8 years into my career, I stopped being a programmer and I started thinking myself as a software engineer. And that made a big difference. And you come up to talk to me afterwards and I can tell you longer stories about that. But that was a key moment in my life when I decided I wasn't just a programmer. I have 25 years game industry experience, 20 years game creation experience, and 14 years of what I consider real game development experience. The rest was kind of tools and other stuff, so I don't quite count it, but I was peripherally in the game industry. But I do have 8.5 years solo indie dev experience. In fact, I've built a sustainable business for 8.5 years. And the main reason you should listen to me at all is I have 2.5 million in sales over that time frame, which it's not huge, but it's enough that I can definitely make the argument that working for myself was better than working for somebody else over those 8.5 years. I also have a really, really good memory, and I actually remember what it's like to be 24, 26, 18, whatever. And I am cautiously optimistic. And you really don't want to listen to the pessimists in general, so that's another reason. Okay, so moving on. Quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to explain why I'm doing the talk. We're going to talk about before Clutter, the Clutter decision of how I ended up doing Clutter, the Clutter results, all my lessons that I've learned throughout my whole career, and now, what if I had to start over again? Let's apply it. I'm going to give myself advice, and then I'm going to just tons of little snippets of wisdom I thought would be worthwhile to share. Okay, so why this talk? I wanted to clarify my own thoughts on starting again. I wanted to review my own history of what will and won't be effective. I wanted to formalize a plan of attack that would work today because what worked 8 years ago won't work anymore. There's the Babe Ruth effect. I wanted to call out my shot. Babe Ruth went, and supposedly he didn't really do it, but he was doing something else. But they think he pointed to and he hit a homer, in a World Series. It was awesome. And I'm going to do that at some point. I'm going to explain big things I'm going to attempt, possibly. So I'll have this permanent video record. And this is a way to recharge my own optimism for the business in these uncertain times of market shrinkage and other things. Okay. So we're going to start with Joe's clueless path to indie. And I really expect, this is really aimed at the 25 and 26-year-olds or even younger. I want to explain that I was basically probably more clueless than even you guys, because I didn't go to a school for game dev. I didn't know I wasn't wanted to be a game dev yet. In fact, I started on Key Punch doing little prime number programs. I had my languages for mainframe languages, but my first game I even tried was Othello in MP Basic just to play Othello because Othello is really annoying if you make a mistake while playing, and I wanted the computer to keep track and be able to go back in time and stuff. But it was boring. It was, I did it in a weekend and it was just not fun. It was okay. Same way with Key Punch. Key Punch was, it took me, you put in your Key Punch cards, 3 days later you find out you missed a semicolon. And I didn't get jazzed to computers till 2 years after that, where I sat down to a CRT the first time and typed something in and immediately got the response helping somebody else do programming. And then I went, oh, this is what I wanted to do. So then, I was actually the only non-COBOL programmer in a COBOL shop for about 6 years. And that's when Unix and C started showing up. And I had started thinking myself as a software engineer and went, this is what I want to be, not that freaking COBOL. COBOL, by the way, is they call it a write-only language. A read-only language. Nobody wants to write it. It was actually written so that non-programming people could supposedly understand it, which was just total bull, and it's like, there's no good analogy. It's horrible. Okay, so I took 4 years, or 3.5, to learn C. And to learn C, I said, well, let's do something interesting. I created this massive game called Modern Problems, which was a collection of puzzles. And everything in the kitchen sink was in it. I did my own mastermind game in it. I did Pipe Dreams crossed with something else, et cetera, et cetera. And it made exactly $80 for me. I think $80 for my partner, too. But $80 is bad, but that game got me 3 job offers. And my advice to kids used to be, go make a game, finish something that you're excited about. I don't think that's good enough anymore. But back then, showing somebody something complete that didn't break, that I was excited about, got me 3 job offers in the span of like 2 weeks. Once I had a dry spell, but really in that 3 weeks, I got these 3 job offers, and I was off on my way to become a game developer. So. Okay, but I was really a tools guy for a while, and that's only so much fun. I luckily worked for a company that got bought out by AOL, and because of that, I had funny money where I didn't have to really work for 3.5 years, so I created a thing called Puzzles by Joe, the very first Puzzles by Joe, and I made a lot of really smart, brainy games for people like me, and I couldn't figure out how to get them to my website. And after doing about 7 or 8 of these really, really cool, smart games, where a town in England, about 20 people liked them. And I even paid $800 once for clicks, and then fought them. Chase Visa fought them so hard they finally returned my money because there was no benefit at all for supposedly the 800 clicks they got me. I said to myself, well, if you can't get people to your website to buy your 7 games you've already made, making game 8 and 9 probably isn't the smartest thing to do. So I sort of stopped doing that. And I started, I hit a thing. I worked on my own as a consultant, but I got lucky. Just as I was going to stop doing games, an old friend I used to work with got me a job at iWin doing Mahjong Quest. And that's how I ended up working for a real company doing real games. And truly, Mahjong Quest was my first. I designed it. I coded most of it. A couple people helped me with, co-designing certain things, but it opened up my brain to bigger development. And it was, Mahjong Quest was huge. There was a huge market called the casual game market that 2005 was just ridiculous. And Mahjong Quest made way too much money. And at the end of it, I did 3 Mahjong Quests. I finally got them to let me do my own design. And I created a thing called Diamonds, a Peter Zell mystery, that was my version of a hidden object game. And hidden object games had just come in. And they basically half greenlit it, so forth. But I was really, really excited. Okay, so taking the leap of faith. So what happened? Diamonds got canceled. 2 other games. The market started shrinking. They lost money. They put in tons of money on a couple other games that tanked, and they pulled the plug on Diamonds. And my future wife said to me, "Can you do that game on your own?" And I went, "No, but I bet you I can do something similar." So Mahjong made millions, and I wanted a little piece of that, even though the market had shrunk and stuff. So I was willing to accept the risk to get, a little bit of more of a reward. But the question for me had to be, is it feasible? And I go back to one of my heroes, and this guy is Patrick McGowan, and he did a show called The Prisoner in the late 60s, still considered one of the best science fiction series ever, even though it's only 17 episodes long, and people are insanely crazy about what the whole thing meant. And he was a true showrunner. He wrote, he starred, he directed everything. And he's an indie rebel, and this guy hates authority, and damn it, I learned a lot from him. So these are the things I hated when I started assessing, working for myself versus others. I said, well, what do I really hate, creating games for others? And there's the backhanded tech compliment. Oh, Joe's really good technical, which translates into don't listen to Joe wanting to color that wallpaper over there. Okay. Joe artistic? No. Joe, what the customer wants? No. But he's really good technical. You got to get that ball flying through the air really good with an art. Oh, that's Joe. Got to get 50% improvement in that framework. That's Joe. Oh, Joe wants to do a really hard puzzle. Oh, don't listen to him. So that really, I hated that. I hated producers and art directors marking their territory with irrelevant game changes. That's the effect I call, can you make it a little bluer? So they'll go, hey, this little irrelevant piece, and they want their, they want to be responsible. So they come in, oh, please change that, because that's going to make the difference. Man, that's going to sell 10,000 copies right there, that one little change. So, okay. I know I sound angry, but we're gonna let that go. I hated fear-based decision making. And this will come up in a second of what I really mean by that. But it's any fear-based. Death by committee. We had 3 guys that made the company $25 million. We were 13 at the time. We went to over 100, and we went to death by committee. And for 2 years, I said to the CEO, you had 3 guys that made you 25 million. Why don't you just say to them, what do they want to do next? Why do you have this death by committee where you think you can predict, why don't you just let them go and make fun? Oh, I'm going to digress this was not in the original talk, but people say all the time, they go, it's really hard to find the fun in games. Okay. And I got so sick of hearing that, I finally came up with an answer. And the answer was, okay, I agree with you. It's really hard to find the fun in game. But you know what's not hard? Finding the not fun and getting the hell away from it. Okay? And that brings me to the next couple topics there, which is whenever they saw a problem, somebody didn't understand a portion of the pop-up help. Oh, let them read. That's great. That's fear-based. Okay? Throughout this also, one last little piece, people think I'm a control freak, and I'm not. I love working with other people that want to take responsibility for whatever their piece is. But if they want to take responsibility, I don't want them. Okay? So I'm not really a control freak. I am a responsibility freak. Okay, moving on. Here's some ways I fought back that I just thought would be useful for anyone to consider using. This is my favorite. This is when you have a CEO who doesn't really play the games you're working on, okay, and wants to make a judgment call. Or it could be an art director that really doesn't play the game. But you know what? I played Mahjong games. I played them for years before I got hired to make a Mahjong game. Oh, that's awesome. So the one thing I can say that they can't even argue with is, I am more like our typical user than you. I might not be able to read their mind, but I'm closer. So either make your case or you have to admit that. And actually, it's worked 2 or 3 times really well. There's a business guy named Peter Drucker. He's awesome. I went from a programmer to a software engineer, and then I started thinking of myself as a knowledge worker. And if you can pull this off with any boss, you'll love it. It's convincing your boss that you know more about how you do your job than them. And because that's true, they've got to listen to your judgment. If you're truly a knowledge worker, it's your knowledge that matters. Now if they think you're just somebody to throw at the problem, you're in trouble. But if you can really convince them of that, you're going to get at least a leverage in some arguments. Also, I always kept moving. Even while waiting for Mahjong, they were dubbing around for 2 to 3 weeks to decide even to do a Mahjong, which way we're going to do it, this and that. I wrote an editor to let me do Mahjong tiles because they weren't giving me feedback. Sometimes they were debating about something. I code both choices up so they could see it in the time they're freaking talking about it, okay? And by the way, being this way, I know I've gone from, by the way, angry to being, yes, I'm an asshole sometimes to work with. But this is all why I went solo. Be better than QA. Don't let QA find your bugs, And when they do, jump on them, man, and get rid of it immediately. And don't, oh, you did it wrong, bullshit. Take responsibility for your own errors and jump at it. Take no prisoners, man. I once got told, a VP come out of a room and he said, gee, what's Joe's problem? And one of my friends who was my boss said, Joe doesn't like it when he's not the smartest man in the room. That's not true. I actually love not being the smartest man in the room. But I am passionate about stuff, that matters. I think that one came after I did a little game for Interactive Network, and I didn't want to label the score anymore. People have seen pinball machines. This was a trivia game. If we have a number up here that kept going up, I didn't see the need for the score real estate. And I fought for 4 hours because they'd always done it that way. And I didn't see the need for it. Sorry, I really didn't. Because even anybody who'd never played one of our games would figure out. And I use the pinball, I think, analogy as the thing. I don't think on pinball machines it says score. It just doesn't. Okay. Mahjong Quest 2, put it on the line. And I'm not going to get into the details, but basically, I heard Mahjong Quest 2 was supposed to ship in a couple months. I was supposed to just do the puzzles. I basically wrote an infamous letter that said, not going to happen. I think I can make it happen. Do you want me to write a second letter explaining why? I wrote that second letter saying I would do it if you ask questions, it's going to be worse. And they basically, I think, responded with, oh, Joe just gave us enough rope to let him hang himself, so let's do it. But I pulled it off. And if you want to hear the details of it, you can ask me later. But basically, push comes to shove, you got to be able to you got to be able to write the check that your mouth can't. I don't know how that expression goes, but you have to back up what you say. Okay. So I have all that in the background that, can I convince myself I can really do it? Is it feasible? I'm pretty sure it was feasible. I did Mahjong Quest 2 pretty much by myself. I didn't need, in fact, I regret not quitting right after that because that's a slide coming up, but we'll get back to that. Can I do it by myself? Sure. Here's the pros, though, and cons. And by myself didn't mean by myself now. Do I need partners at all? Well, the pros is I'm faster. If I don't talk to people, I don't need to debate, no explanations, no design docs. But the cons is it's a little sloppy. No checks and balances, no well-defined methods, no documentation. But the pros, no financial obligation, just me. Just my, whatever it takes me to get the game out. But there's no synergy. Nobody that really bounce shit off of. No legal obligations either. No, when royalties don't have to split that up. But no camaraderie, and I really like camaraderie. And that's part of why I'm actually very deeply in, a deep member of the Georgia Game Development Association. And I'm glad I found them. I'd made this decision beforehand. And if I never found them and wasn't speaking today, I might be in a rubber room somewhere. But I figured I could, figure out the synergy, and figure out the stuff missing afterwards. But I decided to go it myself, and I took 1 year to do that. So I can do it by myself. I picked something where I didn't have to worry about marketing. All I had to do was get the game out. I knew I would get 100,000 eyeballs, and if the conversion rate worked, it would work. And I cut a deal with iWin that for right of first refusal, I could use my old tools. So I got all that in a row, and I even stuck around for like 4 weeks as part of the deal, to help this other game go out. And this is the game. It's an ugly little son of a bitch. But it's a thing of beauty to me. That's the first game, and I really make the argument that, it was a good enough idea, and anybody, 24 could come up with something like this and then go. And we'll get to that in a second. So I thought that game would make less than 10 grand or more than 100K. And I took a man year to do it. And the universe proved me wrong. And that game made about 50,000 in, hold on, let's go back. Sorry. That game made about 50,000 in a year and 4 months. So I did do a fallback plan. When I came to Atlanta, I wrote everybody and said, hey, I'm in the game business a little bit, looking for a job. I flunked a test at CCP. And let me just check time. I flunked at CCP, but I got hired by a gambling company. And I became the math guy for the gambling company, which is really, really funny. But it was my fallback. And we'll get back to that in a second, too. So Clutter went out and made 50,000, which isn't good for a man year of my work. I was working, looking for the 100K mark, basically. But I knew I could do the sequel in half the time. So, we should do this first. Then I'll get to the other story. Even deciding to take the job was a touch. So here's just, I'm not saying whether you should do it or not, but this is what happened to me when I did it. I made 100,000 working that second job over a 3-year period. Decent enough money. Some of it was consulting. Some of it was 3 days a week. Then the last year was just 1 day a week where I didn't really even program. But I went into the office even at 3 days a week, only just 1 day a week, and sometimes 1 day every other week. And I made 100,000. However, because of market shrinkage and everything else, and when I'm honest, I lost at least 200,000 in not getting my game out earlier and the sequels. But I hadn't quite learned that yet and didn't quite, know that. So that safe decision cost me 100,000 overall, and probably more actually, but I'm being conservative. Okay, so this is the franchise effect. That first game where the blue touches the red, that's 50,000 in net royalties to me. And if I'd never done the second game, that might have made it up to 60,000. Well, that first game has now made close to 180,000 now. But it's all because the second game and the games after are all free marketing for that first game. Because people play it the second, and then they go back and get the first one. And we're in a digital age. It's not like a box product. They're still on the shelves everywhere. So a person can jump in even at number 7. And if they love it, they'll go back and play and so forth. And for a while, that curve was awesome, up until that light blue is the Clutter 5. And then the market even started shrinking a little bit more. I have a little saturation. There are websites where they get all access passes. And the longer they play my game, that game might actually generate more than $7 income, which is what it sells on most sites. $7, I get like $3 a copy. But on the all access, if people play it long enough, I could actually make more than that based on things. But people can only play one Clutter game at a time. So eventually, it's my own, I don't know what you call the word, but it's, they're eating each other. I'm reaching a point where, again, person can't play Clutter with 2 hands. So saturation, I guess, a little bit. So I say the dumbest decision I ever made was quit my job and make that first Clutter game. But the smartest decision I ever made was to do the second game. And I came this close to not doing the second game or doing something else. And I'm so glad I did, because the sequel and the franchise effect it's the only reason I'm still, I have a sustainable business. If I got hit by a truck today, knock on wood, the game will generate at least a couple 100,000 before it stops. It just will. And, that's my soft income's at about 8 or 9K right now. I keep doing the games to, keep going, but we're going to get to that too. Okay. So what was Clutter? It was a simple idea that was good enough to pursue. Not a perfect game. I showed it to people. People didn't get it. Don't care. I thought it was good enough to do. I thought it was a puzzle environment that was worth exploring. I felt it was so generic I could do anything I wanted with it. And I was really happy when I finished the first one, and then really happy when I finished the second one that I found enough new things to do that I didn't feel like I was putting out the same old shit. And then really, the third one opened up my eyes about what I really could make it. And then the fourth one, I sort of cheated and put out almost a clone. I focused on mini games. It didn't sell as well. But the fifth one, again, I thought of something new and so forth. Sixth one, I had two people working for me. They energized me. And seventh one, I did it myself to prove that the gorgeous art didn't matter, that I could actually, that I was stupid spending the 12 grand to make better art for the game. And I sort of proved that. And the eighth one I'm doing in Unity, which is also energizing me because I can do motion and movement everywhere that I couldn't do before because of frame rates and other things. And it's such a simple mechanic, and there's Clutter-like games out there now. So I even have a mini subgenre, and even Big Fish gave me a subgenre on their desktop. They pop up occasionally. You might be interested in these categories of games, and one of the categories happens to be Clutter, so that's really cool. It was my game, but it wasn't for me. I'm not a hidden object game. I didn't write it because I wanted to play the game at all. It wasn't a Mario with a twist. It wasn't any game I loved that I wanted to do. It was within the HOG, hidden object game genre, without being HOG. And that's because I wanted to replay. I wasn't going to compete with the gorgeous art and the stories and all of that. It was a way to prove old bosses wrong. People that said things like, nobody will ever buy just a collection of puzzles, etc. And I tacked on stories that are kind of irrelevant, but kind of fun and meta and weird, just because they sort of needed them. That's the one bet I wish I wish I didn't. If I never did that, I'd have 10 or 11 out there now that are just mechanic based. And I'm not sure. I don't think it would matter. I think a third of my customers care about the story. A third are happy that I let them ignore it with like a button click. And a third just don't care. I mean, it's a puzzle game. Is Tetris improved if you stop them every 5 levels to do a cutscene? No, come on, okay. It was the start of a franchise, which I didn't know at the time. It was a way to support my minigame habit. I really didn't want to do Clara, but I wanted to keep creating these 4 or 5 mini games each time. Had a lot of fun doing that until I realized that nobody gave a shit about the mini games except for me. I write one mini game that's really good called Sliders that I wrote originally when I was at iWin just to prove somebody else wrong about a horrible interface they did. And I did my game. I did a seamless interface that I thought was much better, and it was. And Sliders came out of that, and Sliders is also this really generic thing. It's sliders and other squared jigsaw puzzles. And there's so much you can do that's interesting as opposed to just give them a freaking jigsaw puzzle on the computer or even the sliders. Everybody does the select and swap, and my sliders don't do that. You can play it on the phone. It was one of our criteria back with 3-ball matches and even Mahjong. Can your game be played while on the phone while you're talking on the phone with somebody else? Okay, that's the criteria. And think of it, Candy Crush. If you had 2 phones, you could be on the phone with one, dubbing around with the other one, and you could keep both conversations going with no problem. And Sliders has that criteria, even more than Clutter, which takes sort of focus. It was a learning experience about business before pleasure. And in the end, it was indeed good enough because I'm still here 8.5 years later because of Clutter. Okay. So I put a bunch of these in. It's a trap. These are conventional wisdoms that aren't quite right. So learning from success stories is not good. It's a trap. What you really should do is learn from people that failed, figured out how they failed. It's just like the not fun. Figure out how they failed and then don't do that. Because most people succeed uniquely, in a sense. And it's really hard to duplicate. In fact, Mike, in his last talk, sort of made this point at one point, that you just can't capture the success of what they did. Okay, so here's some hindsights. Mistakes made and then some better stuff. So when I was 25, I did not seek advice from adults with more experience early on. I didn't even know how to, I was a math major RPI. I didn't really talk to the faculty at all. Just didn't. I didn't realize how good a programmer I was sooner, which is hard to believe because I am an arrogant son of a bitch. But it's true. I didn't realize how special I really was. In some ways, and again, I've met other programmers that are better. I also didn't realize that being a good programmer isn't the complete job at all. I dug myself at holes at job. I mean, getting along with people, getting things done. There's so many things more than being just a good technical programmer. I didn't think about the career versus the job sooner. I just didn't. I just rolled with the, hey, get a kid, just rolled along. I didn't start reading non-technical books sooner. I always have read technical books, love them. I read 3 books on how C++ was created. That's how geeky I am. One written by the guy who created it was awesome, and the politics involved is great, better than a mystery thriller. I didn't think about the bigger picture sooner. I didn't go on my own sooner. Really, right after I did the first Mahjong game, I should have said, "Okay, let's cut this. I want a piece of that 50. I'm only getting, only getting my 100,000. In fact, I was only getting like 70, 80,000. It's ridiculous. But I didn't see I didn't see everything. I didn't go all in sooner. Again, that's the hedging the bet, working for the other company. And I didn't think long term soon enough. Okay, don't quit your day job. It's a trap. It's your choice of whether you do your day job or not. All I can tell you, that first Modern Problems game I wrote over a 3.5-year period where I worked 20 hours a week on it while working a 40-hour job while doing an hour commute each way, while learning C, basically. But that got me 3 job offers and got me to where I wanted to be. But your day job is a trap. If I was just out of school and got lucky enough to do the Mahjong game and I had the path and I was only making, even 50 or whatever, if my burn rate and I didn't have a family yet, man, that's so much easier to quit and go indie, But once you start getting, that paycheck that's really nice, it's tough to justify throwing that away for your chance. But I did. I threw it away. And actually, what really kills me is a month after I threw it away, IWIN had layoffs. And if I'd stayed around for the extra month, I would have gotten $20K at least in severance, at least, more like $30K. But I don't really regret it, And but you never know. But the market had already tightened up. They stopped doing second party and even internal development and stuff, and they got rid of their programmers except for the one guy who did, Jewel Quest. And by the way, some of this anxiety and tension you guys, suspect around IWIN and my Mahjong and stuff is Mahjong was the redheaded stepchild of IWIN. Jewel Quest went out and owned the internet for 4 months. Back when they figured out for the first time that women over 40 with a little extra income wanted to play certain types of games. And Jewel Quest killed for 4.5 months. And it literally made $15 million itself over the year and a half it was out, okay? Before they started doing sequels and other stuff. But Mahjong, as it dropped from number 1 down to actually number 4, Mahjong Quest replaced it, and IWIN became a company to be dealt with because we put out 2 games in a row. We weren't just a one-hit wonder. Mahjong, well, the gold rush had already started. People started putting games. Mahjong only stayed there for a month and a half. Plus, Mahjong was an old. Jewel Quest was more new. Mahjong was a game. In fact, when I got hired, I immediately tried to get myself fired because I went, why are we doing a Mahjong game? I just started researching. There's like 19 of them out there. They're really good. Why are we doing it? And my boss said, well, if you do it better than anybody else, it'll sell. And I did make the Mahjong Quest my own and stuff. But again, it only made half what Jewel Quest did. So I was always the bastard stepchild or whatever. Okay, moving on. And where are we on time? Oh, not too bad. Okay, things I did right. I always did whatever it took to get the job done. I always kept looking for the next opportunity. I always lived within my means. I always looked for ways to improve my marketability. Programmer, software engineer, knowledge worker, game developer, indie. You can argue that indie isn't improving my marketability, but I differ on that. Always read to improve my craft. Never afraid to learn something new or start a new job. Managed to get paid well to perfect my craft, and that's definitely always good advice. Figure out somebody to pay you while you're perfecting your craft. I managed to learn something useful in every job I had. I managed to learn enough to go solo, and I stuck with a good enough idea long enough for it to become a sustainable business. Okay, so I put this quote in here because I have a love-hate relationship with this quote. I never sit and think. If I sit, I'm programming. You shouldn't sit and think. You can keep your list. If you have a pad, maybe, okay? But sitting and thinking is stupid. You get plenty of time to think. You got drive time, you get shower, whatever. You want to be working. You want to be actually coding, you know, creating a prototype, something when you're sitting. If you're just sitting and thinking, especially with no pad, no, just don't do it, okay? Because that's called analysis paralysis sometimes people have, where they just think things over to death. I knew a guy at the gambling place I worked, and as I was leaving, I finally, when I left the job, I wanted to give him feedback because he had really annoyed me for about 2 years. And because he truly had the worst case of analysis paralysis I ever saw. He had whiteboards twice as big as this with tons of stuff on it, and he always wrote on it and so forth. And I told him, I said, I'll use a fictional name. I said, Fred, the one thing I can offer you, I'm trying to offer you, and I hope you hear this the way I intend it. I said, you have the worst case of analysis paralysis I've ever seen. Sometimes you just have to get in there and start coding and, start moving forward, because you'll learn more doing that than thinking about it. I'll have to give that some thought. True story. Okay, next. At least one step forward each and every day. This is what I do. This is my rules for getting rid of procrastination. This is not terribly unique or original. So to avoid procrastination, all you have to do is create a list. Be very specific of stuff you haven't done yet before you have to ship your game. Pick an item on that list that's easiest to accomplish. Do that. Cross off that item. If it's empty, if your old list is empty, go back to step 1 and see if you've missed anything. Otherwise, go to step 2 and pick another, keep going. If you do that every single freaking day, you will ship your game. You have to, okay? It sounds trite, but trust me. And really, the key part is really find something you can do like in the next 15 minutes even, whenever you're struggling. If you're thinking about big picture, pick something you want to do and just solve a bug, whatever. It'll get you going. Another thing, conventional wisdom, it's a trap. It's a trap. Or should I do it? It's a trap, right? Is that close to his voice? Okay. Conventional wisdom is the sort of the easy answer, okay? You don't, I talk about it a little bit later, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but you should always question conventional wisdom. One of the things I learned from the prisoner, that guy I showed you, was, always ask the next question. Always ask the next question. Just don't accept the answer. Just keep going and keep thinking for yourself, etc. So here's the advice in a nutshell of what my plans, what I'm giving myself now. First of all, invest in Unity or Unreal. And the reason for that is, so way back in the day, I had to pick Microsoft or Borland to learn C. And everybody I asked loved whatever they used. So that's not helpful. They love what they used, and the other thing sucked. And then one of the guys, a really good software engineer, hardware engineer guy, who once taught me, Joe, it's not all software, said to me, what you want to do is ask yourself this question. Which tool are you sure is going to still be around and supported in a few years? Yep, that's it. So I went with Microsoft at the time and never regretted it. I don't think it would have hurt me too much if I'd learned the other, but it definitely saved me some aggravation. Today, I hear people talk about Cocos and all these other things, but you know what? Unreal or Unity. I picked Unity because there's a lot of local game devs that could shorten my learning curve, etc. People make cases for why one's better or the other. I went through them all myself, but I finally just decided that I'd rather it's a camaraderie thing, basically, and just that's why I picked Unity. Think long term. Don't think about just this game. If you're creating, this is the software engineer in me. If you're creating a toolbar or a thing on top to choose levels, do it in such a way that it can go in the next game in 5 freaking seconds, especially with Unity and a prefab, okay? Don't re-architect, no. Start thinking about the things you're going to do more than once for just this game and do them, because they'll pay off if you're really going to do games for a living. If you're not just, hobby. Okay, if possible, do it by yourself just because I think it's easier. Figure out your market. You know, I got lucky and picked one without a market, but now I got to go figure out a freaking market and what I'm really going to attack or not, and whether I'm even going to try to use a PR guy because I hate spending money. So make something that's uniquely yours. I don't want to see another Mario clone, don't. You know, unless you've got a really cool twist that's yours, and then start exploring it and doing something more with it. Create something interesting. I like proving people wrong. I'm going to do that about the FTP model. That's my goal. That's my goal on the side, and we'll get to that in a second too. And remember, I constantly remember that our original digital IP is the gift that keeps on going, given. It really does. So that helps motivate me. Okay. Pleasing the haters. It's a trap. Stop having people try to like your game. Okay? People always hate your game. My first game looks like a student project. My second game, the person was so pissed at Big Fish for even having it on their site. You know your game sucks when it sucks so bad, a guy thinks nobody should be allowed to play it. Okay, not even, he hates it, but nobody should play it. That's how bad this stupid game is, okay? That's horrible, okay? But you're never gonna please the haters. This is what I do. I find the people that love my game that are still complaining about something. And then I figure out what they're complaining about and I fix that. That's what I do. And from game two, that's what I did. I said, screw the haters. And I love the haters, actually. In the fifth game, I had a screen. My stories are all meta, and we'll talk about that some other time, too. But in the fifth game, I had a screenshot that had my best and worst review of each game. 1 star, 5 stars, 1 star, 5. It was great. I loved it. You know, love sharing that with my customers. Okay. Starts with belief. We are self-fulfilling prophecy machines. For good or bad, we do exactly what we believe we can do. Without belief, there can be no action. Without belief, we are just talkers, not doers. Just wanted to point that out. Okay. Babe Ruth pointed out, right? Anybody know who that other guy is? Okay, that other guy's name is Ichiro. I think I'm saying it right. I'm not a big baseball fan, but he hits singles. And he passed Babe Ruth on the number of hits, lifetime hits and stuff. But great batting average, but doesn't do a lot of home runs. But very consistent, and pitchers hate seeing him come up to the bat because he'll find the hole in your infield, and he's like precision. He spent a lot of years in the Japanese, so forth. So I view Clutter and what I do as Ichiro. But I have to figure out a way to be Babe Ruth because I still, I want a yacht someday maybe, But how do you take that swing without, I've made my career out of making sure I'm going to make at least 100K each year during the life of Clutter. And more on some years, but it's not going to jump from 100 to 500K. But I want that 500K shot. So here's what's up next in the Clutterverse. I'm going to ship Clutter 1000 on the PC. That'll make me about 100K. That's my day job. That's the way I view it. And remember, don't quit your day job. So that gets top priority for me. Okay? It's going to be the best Clutter yet. It's made in Unity, all new objects. I'm so excited. But because it's got no story and no text, and it's in Unity, it can go Mac on the tablet and mobile. It can go international, which is going to take me some time to figure out, although I do have some connections there. I still haven't done my Facebook and web version that I think can drive some sales to my direct site. There's a new thing called Cartridge done by the Congregate people that's trying to give Steam a run for its money. I'm always looking for new distribution. And I'm going to start in the final game, or not final, a game after this one called Clutter Control that I'm already thinking about that gives them more choices so that they can actually make a level exactly the way they want it. So if they want 200 matches, they can get it instead of what I give them. And Unity makes that, so much easier than my old system. Okay. Oh, and I have some mini games that I'm getting back into the thing for that are also, I want to prove the FTP model wrong and figure out how to build up an audience with what I call the Sudoku model and so forth. But again, another talk. Okay. That's Clutter 1, Clutter 3, Clutter 5, and the soon Clutter 1000. And it's the upper right. And I don't know if you can tell on this screen, to me, those objects just pop. First of all, they're all new, but they're all slightly bigger, cleaner. they were made from higher def objects to begin with, etc. And they look great on a phone, where that first game doesn't, murky, ugly. Whenever anybody complained about the objects, I couldn't do anything about it, but it hurt. It hurt. I cried. So, okay. Parsing big. How much time do I got? Oh, good. I got enough time. Okay, parsing big data. Another thing I can't do, I can't collect analytics, but we're in the information age. And everybody collects data to parse. And there's A/B testing and metrics on anything and metrics on everything. But nope, I don't get metrics. I don't get A/B testing because of my distributors. Can't even connect to the internet. It's all anecdotal. All my information is anecdotal, and my data is just not as concrete as that A/B testing. So I think of it as Zen data. So I'm going to leave you with some 15 final snippets of wisdom from Zen data. Here we go. Question all conventional wisdom. Because it's usually the easy answer, not necessarily the correct answer. Get good at brutal self-assessment. Only you really know what you really know. But if you ain't honest, you're going to fail. You just need to look yourself in the mirror and know what you're good at and what you're not good at. Me, I'm really good at random and taking any randomization and taking any puzzle and going all the way from an activity to really super, super, super hard by tweaking the parameters and shit. And that's my specialty. One of the very first things I did while learning C is I took a blank screen and flipped a coin going across and down to turn it white. And the first pass got about half of them and it looked snowy. Second pass, another quarter, et cetera, et cetera. After pass 5, there were these holes that looked like a knight's move on chess, over and down, over and down. And then pass 6 got them all. That ain't random. Something's wrong there. And really, from that moment on, and I'm a math guy, I just loved randomness and tweaking. And, so I think I've got a good handle on what random is. And some other time, if you guys want, I have a rule of thumb in random, which has to do, I try to remove bias from like all levels of all choices. And it's hard to explain. And it's hard to see why that puzzle's slightly better. But to me, it is. And it's tough to explain, but when you're randomly generating levels, to me, it makes a difference. For instance, if I had a bug where the clock always showed up as like the second or third match, that'd be horrible. But I've seen games where you notice shit like that. You notice the aces are popping up too often or whatever. So, okay. Getting better at getting better. Apply good software engineering principles to refactoring the way you get your job done. Start thinking about how you can get better, because that will pay off in spades. Quick and dirty versus slow and clean is a lie, because there is a way to beat that. And you beat it by better techniques. With better techniques, you can learn to be quick and clean. Okay, and most people don't. Do you want that back? You want the other one back? I'm sorry. Did you want the picture on that one? Go ahead. Okay. So, yes. These are the ones that were more personal pieces of wisdom. So always and only bet on yourself. He'll show up again. Design doc, design doc. I didn't know how to spell that. Keep a list. When in doubt, start coding. I don't use design docs. And as soon as Clutter 1's done, I copy the directory, Clutter 2 starts. If I find a bug in Clutter 1, that's the only time I do do it in more than one place. But in general, I don't start fresh, except when I went to Unity. And even then, I'm reusing some code and stuff. Get better at reacting quickly. You can only plan for the obvious. This is a movie called Body Heat. I'm going to read it in my best Mickey Rourke. Hey, counselor, anytime you try to do a decent crime, you got 50 ways you're going to screw up. If you think of 25 of them, then you're a genius. And you ain't no genius. And that's how I feel about planning. I made a career out of reacting to the problems. I'm not the best planner in the world because I think of the fingers, and I'm a thumb. And any finger can go and tell you, oh, we need this painted and we need this and this, and they can do all the things I'm going to do if I'm forced to plan. But they're still going to miss the 5 things I'm going to miss. And some people are a little better at planning and might pick up 1 or 2 of those, but they'll never pick up all of them. I'm really quick at reacting when things go wrong. I think it's a good skill to at least think about trying to have. Okay, here we go. I believe I've been unqualified for every job that I was ever hired to do. That is a true statement. That did not stop me, however, from doing those jobs well. And it's just a factor of life. I've never had the imposter syndrome. I've always been a realist, but um, and I've never wanted to work for somebody that wants to hire somebody who's already done what they're doing. I've always made the case back then. You want a guy who's really doing the same thing for 5 years? Isn't he kind of like bored out of his gourd? Is he even thinking anymore? You really want to hire that guy for your organization? No, for me at least. Think long term and short term. Oh, act short term. Make progress every single day. Be adaptable and flexible. That's kind of a trite one. Leave a large body of work. Really. Create a game, finish it. Move on. Make another one. Never going to hurt. Even those 7 or 8 that I couldn't sell got me a job offer at iWin, actually, because he looked at all the stuff and said, wow, this guy's a puzzle guy. He loves doing it. And really, you can never go wrong with more product. How much time I got? Okay, we're getting there. Here's one. Solo or not solo? If partnering, who has the final call, you or your partner? Trick question. Market always has the final call. Okay? Business before pleasure. Really. Otherwise, I won't get too crude, but if you ain't selling your game, what are you doing? It's a hobby. You're not a professional. You're a hobbyist. Okay. Turn your passion for games into your passion for the business of games. Really. Get the business of selling your games, not just your game. Okay. A difference that is no difference is no difference at all. Stop worrying about the shit that doesn't matter. Don't polish the doorknob, And again, when you get with partners, that's what happens is people care about something, it's going to be up here, If it doesn't make a difference, don't worry about it. And most things don't make a difference. That blue does not matter. It really doesn't. Okay, and that goes right along with this. If everything matters, and this is the most Zen, this is the reason I even called this the snippets of wisdom of Zen data. Because if everything matters, nothing matters. And if nothing matters, everything matters. What do I mean by that? I mean, do not sweat any freaking decision. If it bothers you, fix it. If it doesn't, don't. But you better have a certain level of quality in your game all over the place. If something's bad, fix it. But you don't have to make it the most gorgeous thing in the world, the most, you don't have to get down to that pixel level. You don't. Enough is enough. Get it out the door, find out if there's a market for it, etc. And let go of, it's part of the perfectionism, it's part of everything. But really, if everything matters, think about it. If everything matters, how the hell do you even make a judgment of which one's more important? Nothing matters. And if nothing matters, you better be attention to everything or it's all crap, right? So you can't have it. So again, it's Zen because even explaining all that, you either get that point or not. And one of the true Zenisms that's not in my talk is when you've seen the point, you've missed it entirely. Okay. Finally, everything is a learning curve for a future path that you can't predict. 8 Clutter games, 8.5 years, who'd have thunk it? Not me. So finally, the best game that I have ever played is called The Game of Making Original IP. The score is in sales dollars. Not for exposure, not for awards, not for finishing it, not for how beautiful it is, not for how fun it is. I could also add, not that your friends love it, not, there's so many nots. But a digital original IP, it's still the gift that keeps on giving. So you're doing the right thing if you're making digital product. My wife makes pottery. I love her pottery, it's art. If we had a transporter, or what do they call the other machines? A duplicator, a replicator. If we had a replicator, man, it's great. But digital, you've already got your replicator. And that's it. I'm Joe Cassavaugh, Puzzles by Joe, and we have exactly 3 minutes for questions. Please use the mic.
All right, I've got a 2-prong question because you want 3-prong questions in this stream. So prong 1, how cluttered is the clutter tag on Fish?
How cluttered is the clutter?
How many games in your clutter category?
I'm about to release my 8th.
No.
Oh, I think they've made about 4 4 or 5 clones now, but I think it's only 2 companies, and none of them make that well, but based on how far up they get in the top 100 and on their number of reviews. And about half the reviews mention Clutter. So if anything, it's just bumping a few sales to me here and there. Even though some people say, oh, they're better looking objects, etc. But 1,000's going to blow them away anyway. So.
And second question, area you didn't really touch on was persistence, which is something you've talked about as being a major factor in your success. You want to talk a little bit about?
Well, that's kind of the everyday thing. I mean, it was definitely the undercurrent of this talk. That's the marathon versus the sprint, right? You only do a marathon by persistence.
Well, you talk about it specifically with your distribution, your distributors of the game having to be persistent with them.
That's a little different. That's the old, it's. Some of them are really good and you get your money like clockwork, and others, you're Andy Devane from Shawshank Redemption writing a letter every 2 weeks until they finally, pay you or whatever. But that's a tough one. You feel powerless. I just hate that. And it's weird. There's so many trickles. When one trickle dries up, another trickle seems to open. And there's the big ones. Over half my sales came originally, from Big Fish, but when you look at all of it and wherever it is now, they're down to almost a little under 40, I think. I was in a box product for a while, then they stopped doing that. That was a nice little piece of gravy, And I still look for it. I haven't explored Congregate yet, Cartridge actually, which is Congregate's go against Steam or whatever. And I didn't get into the big lies today either. I was going to have a slide that just talked about all the big lies I've railed against for the last 5 years, which is, when I have the young devs, why aren't you going to mobile? Why aren't you on Steam? No insults if that sounded like anybody that's actually, but it's just, I picked this because there was no market. I did just well enough to keep going, and it's been a wild ride actually. So, and the future's bright. I love Unity. I'm 6 times quicker in Unity, I think. I love finding the new objects. I couldn't believe how happy I was when I found new affordable objects to get that 6-year monkey off my back of, love your games, Joe. New objects, please. Please. But I have some awesome fans, by the way, really awesome fans. If they say, when's the new game coming out? And I say soon, they will say, what's soon? What do you mean soon? You said April. In fact, I said end of April. May 1st, 3 emails, 3. When's the new target date, Joe? And I'm very happy. I mean, there are people, I have fans that have played my games for 5 or 6 years for over an hour a day. They tell me about their favorites, this and that, and they love it. So I feel blessed to be the guy that got to create the Clutter games. And again, I picked it specifically because of the market. I picked it to do. For 2 years at iWin, I kept going, give me a genre, I'll build you a game. And then I did Diamonds, which is sort of a hidden out, sort of. But as soon as I had to go on my own, I went, what's the biggest game in the demographic, that I wanted? And it was obviously Hidden Object. I felt I couldn't do a dark and dreary, gorgeous art hidden object game. I didn't, those take 250 to 300,000 in budget and, for everything. But I had these free objects from a company called Hemera Photo Objects, 10,000, 25,000. And I wrote a prototype in a weekend and went, this is fun. So, and I showed it to people. I will tell you that the moment I knew I was going to do okay, I went had right of first refusal. I was out there to show them the game. I showed it to the finance guy. I showed him the hint mechanism. He did a few. He was down to only one last one. And he looked and looked and looked and could not find it. And I said, Curtis, you can always use the hint if you'd like. And he finally gave up and used the hint. And not covered by anything, because that's part of the game, is it wouldn't work there, right? Right on top, 2 of the biggest brightest red Christmas bows right there. And they do this little shake and he goes, ah! And he couldn't believe he couldn't see that. And I knew, because one of my criteria for good games is a good game's when you get beat is you feel like you beat yourself. It's not the game pointing the gun at you or the foot, whatever, but the you, if you tried a little harder, you should have been able to beat it. That's why Tetris is so awesome, because Tetris, if you don't pay attention in Tetris, Tetris can beat you, so to speak, and it beats everybody, right, except for Chuck Norris. But when you lose your focus just for a second at Tetris, or you do something wrong, you make a mistake. You never blame it on the interface. It's you that made the mistake, and that's why Tetris is so addicting and so forth. So, done. Thanks again for coming. Thanks, Sebastian, for having me.